Throughout the years, we've heard about Mazda's ambitions to go upmarket, but we really didn't know how Mazda was going to get there. They wanted to take on Acura, Lexus, Infiniti, and maybe even Volvo, but there were a lot of questions surrounding Mazda's ambitions and goals until last year when we got the all-new 2024 Mazda CX-70, which has most certainly changed the game in the three-row luxury crossover market, maybe even in the mainstream segments as well, because it's too grand to be compared to a Honda Pilot and Volkswagen Atlas, and also it undercuts the BMW X5 and the Lexus RX 350, so it falls in that gray zone. Today we're taking a look at the all-new 2025 Mazda CX-70, and some of you are going to say that it's basically a two-row version of a CX-90, and you wouldn't be too wrong with that statement. However, Mazda did make some slight tweaks to give this vehicle its own look and personality, but also to give it its own value proposition within the Mazda lineup. And in this video, we're going to go over everything. We're going to take a look at the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and see why, if you are looking at buying a luxury crossover under $60,000, the CX-70 might be the choice for you. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Ira Mazda of Westwood in Westwood, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the all-new CX-70. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Mazda inventory. So let's begin with what's most important, and that is pricing. Today we're taking a look at the Turbo S Premium, which sits just below the top trim in the lineup, which is the Turbo S Premium Plus, and you're looking at spending right around $53,000 for this model. Now, when you're cross-shopping both trims with the Turbo S badge, you're going to notice that when it comes to features, you're not missing out on too much. You still get heated and ventilated Nappa leather seats, you still get a head-up display and heated rear seats. You're not missing out on anything when it comes to the key features. There are some very minor features that the Turbo S Premium Plus has that you're not going to get with the Turbo S Premium, but I think it's perfectly okay because you are saving around $3,000 right off the bat. Now, when it comes to pricing though, and as I discussed earlier on, the CX-70 does fall in a gray zone. It's also a very unique vehicle for its segment and market because on the lower end, this starts just above $41,000, and you could cross-shop this with a Volkswagen Atlas or a Honda Passport, maybe even a Kia Telluride and Ford Explorer. But then on the higher end, when you're looking at spending close to $55,000, it undercuts the Lexus RX 350, Acura MDX, and Infiniti QX60, and I feel that with the CX-70, it's most certainly worthy of being in that conversation. Now, another reason why I also look at the CX-70 as being a unique vehicle is that it is rear-wheel drive bias, which we only really see in the luxury segments, such as the BMW X5, the Genesis GV80, and Mercedes-Benz GLE. A lot of mainstream two-row and three-row crossovers are front-wheel drive based, but also it comes down to the size as well for the CX-70 and CX-90. When you have a length of around 202 inches, this would be the same size as a BMW X7 and also a bit bigger than the Ford Explorer. So it's a very large vehicle, and with that you get better practicality and better interior space, which we'll find out later on in this video. Design-wise for the CX-70, this is where it diverges a bit from its sibling. Up front, it does have a unique style. It's more aggressive, looks sportier, and I think looks more youthful. It definitely draws my attention more than the CX-90. Your attention is going to be focusing on the honeycomb mesh grille, which is outlined by blacked out chrome, which isn't as noticeable on our model since we have a black CX-70. Those gloss black accents will be hidden on our model, such as the gloss black side mirror caps and gloss black roof rails. But again, on a brighter color, that's going to look very sleek and lower profile. You're going to have full LED headlights with LED turn signals making their way into the grille. And then for the lower portion of the front bumper, you're going to have that mesh grille design again with active side air curtains to improve the aerodynamics of this vehicle. As you make your way around to the back, nothing too different from the CX-90. Same taillights that are full LED with the LED turn signals as well that do pulsate, much like we see with the CX-5 and CX-50. Then for the lower portion of the rear bumper, you're going to have that mesh grille design again, adding some symmetry to the overall appearance of the CX-70. Then quickly taking a look at the side profile, you are going to have some classier undertones here with the CX-70 that most certainly go a long way, but tell me that Mazda is serious about being seen as a luxury manufacturer. So first, starting off with the wheels, you are going to have 21-inch alloy alloy wheels that are bicolor, giving this vehicle a classier silhouette, but also a grand appearance on the roadways. But it's the smaller details and the finer details that, to me, go very far in its design. And that is the inline 6 badge on the front fender, like we see with the CX-90, and then the Mazda badge stamped on the passenger door. Again, a small touch that we don't typically see from the mainstream manufacturers. You're also going to have power adjustable side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Under the hood for the Turbo S trims, you are going to receive a 3.3-liter turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine, producing 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, which is paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission and a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that for non-Turbo S models, you're going to still get the inline 6, but with only 280 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque, which is still pretty respectable for a vehicle in this market. But just keep in mind that if you want the best performance, go with the Turbo S. Also, I want to mention that you do get a plug-in hybrid option. It is powered by a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, producing 323 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque with 26 miles of full electric range. Now, one incentive of going with the plug-in hybrid, outside the fact that it would be economical, is the fact that you might qualify for the federal tax credits. So that incentive alone could most certainly sway your decision if you are looking at buying a CX-70 or CX-90. All models, regardless of powertrain, are all-wheel drive. So even though it is a rear-wheel drive biased platform, you're going to have that all-wheel drive for better year-round capability and versatility. Then for those wondering about straight line speed for the CX-70 with this powertrain, you're looking at a 0 to 60 time of around 6 seconds, which would fall in line with a lot of vehicles in this market. Also, one thing to keep in mind here is that even though the CX-70 would be sportier than a lot of two-row crossovers and SUVs in this market, it isn't going to be a BMW X5 M50 fighter, and I wouldn't look at it as being a sporty vehicle in that sense. But to have that straight line speed under 6 seconds or around 6 seconds is most certainly going to give you that exhilarating driving experience that you want out of a vehicle such as this. Stepping inside the CX-70, what you're going to notice immediately is that it's identical to the CX-90. So similar layout when it comes to the infotainment system, full digital gauge cluster, also of course even the packages such as your heated and ventilated seats and the 3-zone climate control. The only thing you are going to be missing out on between the CX-70 and CX-90 is that the rear seats are not ventilated. But the thing that really stands out to me about the CX-70 is the fact that you do get some high quality materials such as these seats. We have red Nappa leather, which definitely goes really well with the black exterior. Also, as I mentioned before, they're heated and ventilated, and the driver's side has 2-position memory for added convenience. But also, it's the soft touch materials on the dashboard and armrests and door panels that most certainly go a long way, and that's where I think the CX-70 differentiates itself from the mainstream competitors in this segment, and I think would be in the same conversation with vehicles such as the Lexus RX 350, for example. Technology-wise, in front of you, you are going to have a full digital gauge cluster, which is somewhat customizable. Now, in each drive mode, it does change the look a bit, where you can go through sport, normal, and off-road. Definitely adds a new characteristic to the driving experience and also adds a different color, which is what we typically see in a lot of vehicles in this market and price range. By using the info button on the left side of the steering wheel, you can scroll through some information where you can see your MPG numbers, but also your onboard compass as well. Again, nothing too in-depth, but I think when it comes to the resolution and quality, very nice for a vehicle in this segment. Supplementing the full digital gauge cluster with the CX-70 and the Turbo S Premium, you are going to have a head-up display, which is very easy to read, and it's definitely at eye level. And Mazda has been very good about that with their vehicles as of late. A lot of head-up displays, even today in 2024, just aren't that good. They're not really that high resolution, but Mazda has done a very good job with their technology lately. Then quickly taking a look at the infotainment system, you are going to have a 12-inch display with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, and new is Amazon Alexa. When paired with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, it functions as a touchscreen, which a lot of people have been clamoring for from Mazda for a very long time, and Mazda is listening to their customers, as this is going to be integrated into the entire lineup, including the 2024 Miata that we recently checked out. Now, some people are talking about how with Mazda's infotainment system itself, you can only use the rotary dial and quick access buttons found on the center console. I'm not going to complain about that for one specific reason. Beneath the head unit, you are going to have physical buttons and dials for your climate control, 2 double heated and ventilated seats, and your heated steering wheel. And because of that, since you don't have to access these climate settings on the head unit, I don't think it's necessary to have this screen be solely a touchscreen at all. So I like the fact you still have the dials, you still have the buttons, and it just gives you more of a BMW-like experience. It kind of reminds me of having the iDrive 7 or iDrive 8 head unit. So from that perspective, I think if you're hopping into a Mazda product or the CX-70 for the first time, you're going to like this setup. You're going to like the fact that when you are using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can just use this as a touchscreen rather than having to use that dial. One of the incentives of choosing one of the Turbo S trims for 2025 is that you also receive a plethora of camera angles, such as a front and rear backup camera with trajectory and a top view, helping you park the CX-70. Because when you do hop behind the wheel of this vehicle for the first time, it will take some time to get adjusted to the size of this vehicle. So take it slow, but with those camera angles, it will definitely help you out for sure when you are parking on the street or maybe in a small garage. Continuing on with the rest of the interior, you are going to have a wireless phone charging pad with a 12-volt outlet. Then next to the gear shifter will be your hill descent control button and the button that controls your camera systems. You're also going to find the drive mode selector within arm's reach, giving you the ability to switch between sport, normal, and off-road. And then as we discussed earlier on with the infotainment system, you will have a rotor dial and quick access buttons to get you to different menus. Also with the infotainment system, you will have onboard navigation and a 12-speaker Bose sound system, which amplifies the audio of your favorite music. Next to the rotor dial will be your electric parking brake and auto vehicle hold, and you can also use the dial which controls your volume and tuning, which again is something I really like to see in a vehicle like this, and have more of a tactile interior that really is rare in the luxury segments. Then for the center storage compartment, you are going to have 2 USB-C inputs and enough room for maybe a smartphone or wallet. Then to round out the front seating area, above will be a panoramic sunroof, which will bring in a lot of natural light to the interior, especially with the red Napa leather seats that we have here on our model, but also it gives you more of an open air experience inside the CX-70. Moving on to the second row, we're going to start off on the passenger side. And this has been adjusted most of the way back, and it's also somewhat on a recline. And I have plenty of legroom here, and that is one of the testaments to the CX-70 and CX-90 that I think a lot of buyers are absolutely loving, whether it is the 2 or 3 row configuration. Because with this vehicle, what you have is 39.5 inches of legroom, and that is close to being class leading in the mainstream segments, but outclasses a lot of luxury crossovers at this price point, giving you a lot of versatility and overall practicality. Now, even though the CX-70 was designed to be for empty nesters, and you can definitely see that with the interior materials that Mazda used, whereas the CX-90 is more of a family crossover. If you are somebody that is going on frequent road trips and you have taller adults or maybe even older children sitting in the second row, everyone should be comfortable back here, especially when it comes to headroom and also shoulder room as well. There's a lot of interior space to work with the CX-70, and that is one of the benefits of having such a long vehicle to work with on this platform. Now, I think that if you're on the height of maybe 5'8" or 5'9", you won't be hitting your head on the headliner. Also better yet is that these seats do recline a bit by around 10 to 15 degrees, giving you more comfort as well. Another feature that carries over from the CX-90 is the fact that these seats do slide on rails both forwards and backwards to maximize the amount of rear cargo space behind you, and as some people have suggested, to have the child seat closer to the front driver or passenger seat for added safety. Now, moving on to the center seat, you are going to have some decent placements for your feet. The center hump isn't that aggressive, but it is rather wide, taking away from legroom and possibly shoulder room as well. Now, I don't think you'll have any issues trying to squeeze in a third person, but I will say though that you might want to have the shortest person in the center just to maximize that interior space. And then on the driver's side, the seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have plenty of legroom here where I can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the driving experience. And I will most certainly recline these seats so I can just have no care in the world while my driver has to deal with the horrible commuters out there on the roadways these days. Also back here, you are going to have center air vents to go along with 2 USB-C inputs, climate control, and 2-level heated outboard seats. Regardless of whether you go with the Turbo S Premium or Premium Plus, you do not get ventilated seats, which you do get on the CX-90. You're also going to have rear sunshades to block out the haters, but also to provide some better privacy, and of course to block out that sun on a very hot day like today. And then to round out the second row seating area, you are going to receive a wide and nicely cushioned center armrest with 2 cup holders. Making our way around to the back, you are going to receive a power liftgate. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 40 cubic feet of room, which would be class leading in the luxury segments and very much on par with the Volkswagen Atlas and also the Honda Passport. If you're looking for a vehicle that does give you that versatility and practicality, the CX-70 is basically a dream come true because you have the luxury interior, but now you also have the interior space. And also, by not going with the CX-90, you don't need to worry about having to lower those third row seats. And better yet, because you don't have those third row seats, you have an additional compartment under the floor mat. Now, one thing I do want to point out though, with the CX-70, you do get a spare tire. You'll do some digging underneath the floor mat, but it is there if you do encounter a flat on your road trips or travels. Now, I think that if you are going on a road trip with the family, you can easily fit 10, 12, maybe more bags of luggage back here, making it a great family vehicle, but also, as Mazda says, this is a crossover for someone who is older in life that doesn't have kids at home. But either way, I think this is still very great to have for a vehicle in this market and a great alternative to some of the mainstream competitors at this price point if you are looking at buying maybe a base model for the CX-70. On the left side of the rear cargo area, you will have a compartment for some smaller items, such as maybe a couple water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Also on the left side of the rear cargo area, you will have the buttons that will conveniently lower the second row seats automatically. Now, unfortunately, they don't fold back up automatically, but again, this is a vehicle under $60,000. I love seeing that because it does add a lot of convenience, especially if you are loading this vehicle up with heavy equipment. But with the second row seats folded, you are looking at right around 75 cubic feet of room, which is identical to the CX-90, but also on par with that BMW X5, with the Mercedes-Benz GLE, and other luxury crossovers under $60,000 or just above that. Then, of course, against mainstream competitors, it's not going to be as sizable, but I still think that if you're looking for a vehicle that has a soft-to-touch materials that feels more grand and upscale for its price point, this is still more than adequate for sure. And then once you're done, just press the button and the liftgate will close automatically. So now that we've gone over everything, let's take the CX-70 out for a quick test drive to see how it performs. So we're going to start off in sport mode because why not? We have a inline 6-cylinder engine, an 8-speed automatic transmission, a nicely weighted steering, and having experienced this crossover basically last year with the CX-90, I know exactly what to expect. What Mazda has done with this platform, though, is really phenomenal, and they improved it for the CX-70. Mazda claims that they made some software updates to the powertrain and the transmission to limit lag and to provide smoother gear shifts. And I will say that having driven this vehicle for about 10 to 15 minutes now, they've most certainly done that for sure. One of the reasons why you're going to hear me say that this is a luxury crossover rather than being a mainstream two-row SUV going head-to-head with that Passport or Atlas is mostly because of the refinement, but also the attributes and demeanor on the roadway for this vehicle, because it has the same feeling and quality as a BMW X5. It kind of feels like an Acura MDX, and I said that with the CX-90, that this is an Acura MDX fighter, and the CX-70 is no different. Mazda does a fantastic job of giving their vehicles a nice weighted steering, so when you are in the corners on these winding back roads, you do get some feedback. It's not vague steering, it's not numb or sedated like a lot of Japanese rivals. And that is one thing that I can really enjoy about Mazda products, whether it is the CX-5, CX-50, or maybe even the Mazda 3 hatchback, that they give you a vehicle that really blurs the lines between being mainstream, but also luxurious as well. It has a very Euro quality to it that I can definitely appreciate. What I find genuinely surprising with the CX-70 or the CX-90 is how well it feels on the road and how planted it feels. For an SUV of this size and weight, it just doesn't feel natural. And that's also pretty impressive for a vehicle that does not have adaptive dampers. Because a lot of luxury crossovers would, especially if you were in sport mode, you maybe get a stiffer suspension and stiffer handling. But you don't get that with the CX-70 or CX-90. On the brakes, nice and strong, gives you a lot of confidence when you are heading into the corners. And even at around 40 miles an hour, there's not a lot of body roll. And as I said with the CX-90, This does not drive like an SUV that is 200 inches in length, and it doesn't feel as wide as it looks from the outside. Its agility and maneuverability would be similar to a vehicle the size of the CX-5 or CX-50. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think you'll feel like you maybe upsized too much with the CX-70. Where you're like, oh my gosh, this is bigger than a two-row crossover that I've been comparing it with. Honestly, when you're behind the wheel, it's also because of the steering ratio and just the way it feels on the road. It just really sizes down this vehicle a bit too much to the point where you have a lot more confidence than you probably should for an SUV of this size that does not have a sports tune suspension. Now, since I have a camper in front of us, that kind of limits the enjoyment we're going to have on these winding back roads as I do another loop. So I place it in normal mode, and as you can tell, the engine is quieted down. Steering is still firm and decently weighted, which again is something I really like to see, even in its less aggressive setting. But also, it now feels like a luxury crossover. Now, I don't think that this is a BMW X5 fighter at all. In fact, this would be an Acura MDX A-Spec competitor. And the fact that it can balance both being sporty, but also luxurious and comfortable, is really where the CX-70 and CX-90 is a great alternative. But also, if we were to put this in the mainstream segments, it's almost unheard of to have a vehicle that can do both, which is why I don't look at it as being a mainstream competitor. I've been on these roads with the Volkswagen Atlas. I have to say the Atlas felt a bit too cumbersome on these roads. It was not the most enjoyable experience, and also the fact they dropped the V6, not as fun either. But as a daily driver, as a road trip vehicle, it's very quiet. The insulation is top notch. Also, another thing too is that you sit pretty high up in this vehicle, giving you a nice commanding feel and presence over the roadways. Definitely adds to the safety that we have here with the CX-70. Now also, I might as well get into the overall vision that we have here with this model. So nice panoramic view. A-pillars are somewhat aggressive, mostly because they're closer towards you. So you might have some blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. Your side mirrors are pretty big, and I can see everything in my blind spots and to the lane next to me. And looking out back, even though we do not have the digital rear view mirror, I can see what's directly behind me, even with the headrests in the way. So a lot of vision here, and that just adds on to the fact that you do sit pretty high up in the CX-70. It gives you a traditional SUV feel when you are behind the wheel. And then getting back to the suspension and chassis for a minute, for an SUV that does not have adaptive dampers, it goes over the bumps and imperfections very well. You barely feel them, and you have a nice soft and cushioned experience when you are on the back roads and when you are encountering some of those potholes and imperfections. But also, it's because of that rigidity, it's because of that refinement and quality that it is, in essence, a luxury two-row crossover. Compared to the Honda Passport, which does feel somewhat truck-like, and also the Volkswagen Atlas, this feels more premium. Now, I would have to review a CX-70 that is closer to the base model rather than a top trim or close to top trim with a Turbo S. I'd love to experience the inline six that isn't tuned to 340 horsepower, but in this configuration, it is most certainly worthy of being in the conversation with the Acura MDX, with the Lexus RX 350, with the Infiniti QX60. And I would say there's some attributes here, there's some qualities with the Mazda CX-70 that I like more than in the Lexus RX 350 and also the Infiniti QX60. I like the cleanly designed interior. I really like the fact that with the infotainment system, it's a touchscreen now when you're using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The full digital gauge cluster is a welcomed addition to Mazda's lineup. Definitely gives you that higher quality experience. Also, as I talked about earlier on when we checked out the interior, the soft touch materials do go a long way, and the fact that these are Nappa leather seats, again, gives you that quality that you're not going to get from the mainstream competitors. Mazda is going one step above and beyond their closest rivals or their traditional rivals. And for a brand that has this ambition and these goals to compete in the luxury segments, this is what you need to have. This is what you would expect. Now, also another thing too with the Mazda CX-70, because Mazda's doing this a little differently, This kind of reminds me of where Genesis was before Genesis went off into their own direction and became a subsidiary of Kia and Hyundai. Because you are going to have a lot of brand snobs in the US that are going to say, well, this isn't a BMW, this isn't an Audi or a Porsche, so why should I choose a Mazda at $56,000 rather than going with something that is premium, that has built a tradition of over 20, 30 years of giving me the luxury and the quality that I demand at this price point? I would say get over your brand snobbery and take a look at a Mazda, experience it, because this is unlike anything you've probably ever had here with Mazda in the past. Although the CX-5 was already giving us an indication of what Mazda had planned. I think the CX-5 is a lot nicer than people give it credit for, especially with the interior quality. And they brought that up to the CX-70 and CX-90, and the fact that that quality is so nice and so jarring at the same time is why I think you now have to compare this to its domestic rivals that are in the luxury segments. And that was about 3/4 throttle there. And it still has a great pickup. I will say, out of all vehicles that are designed and engineered to be family haulers or vehicles for an older demographic, this is one of the most inspiring vehicles I've driven in this market. And as I wrap up this test drive, while some of you who may have disagreed with me throughout this entire video saying the CX-70 is a competitor to a Ford Explorer, a Honda Pilot and Passport, and a Volkswagen Atlas, the reason why I say it isn't is because of what it's giving you from the on-road perspective. With the Pilot and Passport, they're rugged SUVs, especially with the Trail Sport. And you feel that across the board in the Pilot and Passport lineup, where it has this rugged feel on the roadways, a very traditional 3-row SUV or 2-row SUV experience. The Atlas, what they've done with the Turbo 4, I think just ruined the vehicle overall. Even though the Atlas is your only German offering in this segment, technically speaking. And then Ford with the Explorer, yes, rear-wheel drive bias platform, but with the Explorer, you don't get this refinement, you don't get this quality. And then lastly with Toyota, you could cross-shop this with the Highlander or Grand Highlander, but if you start going in the Grand Highlander direction because of the size and length, the Grand Highlander feels a bit too cumbersome. I have felt for well over a year that the CX-90 and now the CX-70 should be at least a consideration for SUV of the year. And even though Mazda has received very little recognition for what they've done here with these two models, I think when you're looking at buying a vehicle now, especially in 2024, that you can save about $10,000 to $15,000 by not opting for the BMW X5, by not going with the Genesis GV80 or an Audi Q7. You end up with a vehicle at around $55,000 that feels luxurious, that feels upscale, that feels refined, but you're not breaking the bank. And there's not a lot of vehicles in any market that gives you that type of value. And also, you don't feel like you're losing anything choosing a CX-90 or CX-70. It's all going to come down to the brand snobbery. If you can get past that, if you can get past the Mazda logo on the grille and the fact that it says CX-70 on the back, you can be behind the wheel of this vehicle and feel as though you're driving a BMW. It's a poor man's BMW in an era when vehicles are way too overpriced and overinflated. And that's why I think whether it's a CX-90, CX-70, definitely take a closer look at them. But one thing I will say though, even though I am an enthusiast and I love the inline six, take a closer look at the plug-in hybrid with the 2.5. Not because of the fact that you get the 26 miles of electric range, and not because you really don't sacrifice anything when it comes to the on-road performance, but rather it's the incentives. It's the opportunity to get the $7,500 federal tax credits. And that's one of the reasons why Mazda has sold 40% plug-in hybrids for the CX-90, and I have a good feeling that the CX-70 will follow suit. The plug-in hybrid to me is a great value, especially when you throw in those incentives and those tax credits. But even with the inline six, fantastic vehicle for a non-German or non-European brand. So in closing, the Mazda CX-70 is the byproduct of aiming for the stars, because even if you don't make it, you end up landing on the moon. And Mazda most certainly left the stratosphere with the CX-70 and this platform. But they've also stumbled upon a vehicle that in a way is the Japanese version of a Genesis GV80. I am in no way going to say that this is a BMW X5 fighter, but it is a poor man's BMW X5 with the inline six. Better yet, with the Turbo S models, you are going to have an interior that is high quality and upscale, under $60,000, which right now is unheard of. Well, you can cross-shop this with top trims from Honda, Toyota, Volkswagen, maybe even Ford with the Explorer. With the Turbo S, I still think you have to throw in the Acura MDX, Infiniti QX60, and Lexus RX 350 into the mix. And if you are looking at buying a luxury crossover at around $60,000, definitely have the CX-70 or CX-90 on your list of considerations, because I think you'll be genuinely impressed. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time.